Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. It's Friday Fun Day, so today I wanted to talk about an idea I had for a class called the Elemental Mage. Now, comes from my idea book, which is always near me, although it's actually in one of the older books behind me. I had this idea a long time ago. I wrote it down in detail after I left Carbine because I had designed a class for WildStar called the Elementalist that had been scrapped. But I still noodled about that idea, and I just wanted to kind of get the class concept written down. Now, this isn't an IP. It's for use in any kind of game. It presupposes some things that you have magic. Part of it presupposes that it's multiplayer. So it doesn't have to be an MMO, but I'll get to that. I'll talk about it. I'm going to go through the stages that I conceive this, from basic design to more advanced stuff to how it levels up, and even some ideas I had for how the art would work for this class. So let's jump in. What is the basic design of the Elemental Mage? I conceived of it being a wizard who had all their spells in one of four groups: fire, water, earth, and air. And they were designed to be very different in what those spells in those groups could do, so that you could think of each one of those as sort of a specialty, but at the same time meaning a restriction. So I'll walk through what my notes had for these. So for the fire group, this was the most powerful damage group. It had a lot of different types of damaging spells, different kinds of AoEs, different shapes, different ranges, whether or not they did intense amount of damage right away, if they had lingering damage in the form of dots, damage over time, how long those dots lasted, what kind of damage they did. So it had you can think of a fire mage as, I'm going to damage you right now. The water group, however, was conceived very differently. It had a lot of friendly healing spells of all kinds. Single person healing, AoE healing, where anyone who's friendly to you would get healed. The water group contained a lot of debuff removals. So if you or someone in your party has been subjected to a spell that's hurting them, the water group had spells to remove those things. In addition, the water group had many enemy debuffs to apply, which includes dots. I had the water mage including frost and cold type spells, so you could think of that gives you a good idea of what kind of dots and debuffs it would have. It would have like freezing damage, slowing, stuff like that. The next group would be earth. Earth was one of the most powerful friendly defensive buffs. So the earth mage is the one who's going to increase the damage resistance people have. It's going to deflect. Maybe it can deflect incoming attacks. Maybe there's rocks spinning around you and they just deflect ranged attacks. The earth elementalist can apply enemy debuffs. So think slows, root in place, paralyzations where rocks just, come up and they're either hard to walk through or they even grab your feet so you can't move. The earth elemental mage is who I think of as the crowd controller. Water can do it a little. Earth is the master. Same way as water can do a few damage in the form of dots, but fire is really the damage one. And then the air elemental mage was the true mix. So they could do damage, but it wasn't as good as fire, and there were no dots. It was basically maybe it air gust hits you and hurt you a little bit. Maybe electricity could be part of this one, so maybe you can get shocked. But there's nothing lingering. The air college has no damage over time spells. They get some healing spells, but they're all single target. So they're not as effective as the water group that can do area heals. Or maybe they can't even do ranged heals, or maybe the ranged heals are higher level. So early on they have to touch their targets to heal them. They also get crowd control, but again, not nearly as good as the Earth group. So theirs are basically knockbacks. And they can knock someone back. So the person, maybe they fall over and have to stand back up, or maybe they have to come back. You have to use some of their action points. I haven't even thought about combat to approach you to fight you again. And then they do have some debuffs. Again, these debuffs are not going to be as good as water and especially Earth's debuffs. Things like, you blow sand in someone's face and now their 2-hit is reduced. Or you have a swirling vortex around you, which makes you harder to hit. It's good. Basically, air is a nice mix of a lot of things. None of them as strong as specific spells in the other 3 groups. Now, the way I imagined the Elemental Mage working in this world, in this whatever IP it gets inserted into, is outside of combat, any spell that the mage knows, they can cast. And I'll talk about known spells in a second. But once combat starts, the mage is restricted to only one group. So once combat starts, they can only throw fire, water, earth, or air spells. How is that group decided? Here's some options. Maybe it's set by the player. Maybe he's like, I'm going to play a fire mage. Outside of combat, I can cast all kinds of spells, but once I get into combat, it's fire only. Maybe it's restricted by the first spell you cast in combat. So once combat starts, the first spell you cast locks you into place. And that's the only group you can cast from now on. So if you cast Fireball, you're now casting fire spells. If you cast a, Earth enemy debuff, you're now an Earth Mage. Maybe this is an option set in the game options. Which one of those? Maybe it's set. So maybe you can have set by player. Maybe it can be first spell cast. Or maybe it's perk. Maybe you have to, you're restricted in by the first spell cast, but maybe you can buy a perk later that says you're always going to be a fire mage or something like that. I'm not sure if that would be a perk. Maybe it'd be a trait. Maybe it's a class trait. You can play with it. But let's talk about leveling up now. Whenever an elemental mage levels up, they get some spell points to spend on new spells. They don't have to spend them right away, and there's only a few spells available for purchase at level up. These are like widely known spells available in each group. The other spells in those groups have to be found out in the world. Maybe there's a trainer that is out there. Maybe he wants you to do a quest before he'll give you the spell, or maybe you have to buy the spell from him. Maybe there are drops off of powerful creatures. Maybe you have to go fight a boss somewhere to get a drop of that spell. Once you get that spell, you still have to use a spell point to learn it, which is why a lot of people won't spend all their spell points when they level up. Or they collect those things they find in the world, and then the next time they level up, they spend their points on those spells, the found spells, rather than spells that are widely available. There can also be a lot of really interesting perks for this class. The obvious ones are you cast better in a particular group. So your fire spells do more damage, or your water spells heal more, or have a bigger radius, or your earth spells are harder to resist the enemy debuffs. You can do a wide number of perks. They can also provide extra spell points every time you level up. These perks can be done in a variety of ways. Maybe every time you level up, you get the same number of spell points everyone else gets, but then you get another one that can only be used on found spells. So you can't buy it on the level up known spells. It's like, and here's an extra point, so in case you ever find a spell, you can do it on that. Maybe there's perks that give you unrestricted. You can use them on the known ones. You can use them on the found ones. Another one that would be interesting is that one time in combat, you can switch your group, your spell group. So you start combat and you're a fire mage, and then you switch once, and now you're a water mage. Once you switch, you can't switch again. That would be a really interesting perk. I can imagine a whole family of perks along this way. Like maybe you can temporarily, maybe it starts with you can cast one spell from another group. Just once. Maybe it's once from one particular one. You can cast one air. Maybe you can cast one fire. Maybe it's just one spell from any group you're not currently attuned to. Maybe you can switch what group you're casting. All kinds of perks you could do. So I even had some ideas on art, how I wanted art to work for this class. And that was the animation of the cast tells you the spell type. Is it going to be a self cast? So are they buffing themselves or healing themselves? Is it a touch space spell? Is it a personal AoE, meaning they're going to cast a spell and it's in a certain radius, or maybe it's a cone? Or is it a ranged single target, or is it a ranged AoE? The animation for that spell cast will be different and will tell, you, if you're watching an enemy caster, an elemental mage, what kind of spell they're casting. The particle effects themselves will tell you exactly what spell it is, which includes what group it's in. Maybe they're color based, but they have to be something else too, so I can play my own game. But so maybe all the water spells have some kind of particular watery part of their particle effect, and the particle effect itself is unique by spell, or at least unique enough that the combination of the animation and the particle effect lets you know exactly the spell being cast. So that'd be really cool. So you can tell, oh no, here comes an incoming fireball. Oh shoot, he's going to heal all the bad guys. Why would you want this? Maybe you want to introduce counter spells. Maybe you want to introduce spell interruption. Maybe you just want to be able to buff your friendly targets against fire when you see an enemy mage about to cast a fireball. Who knows? That's pretty much all of the notes I have. I'm curious in the comment section what you guys think of a class like this, and also if you've seen any classes like this in existing games. I can think of a few. I don't know if this exact class exists in any game I've ever seen, but if you've seen it, let me know in the comments. And have a fun Friday.